Specifically, let's talk about functions of behavior. First of all, what is a behavioral function? When we're talking about functions of behaviors, what we're really looking at is what's the source of reinforcement. What's a student accessing or avoiding that is maintaining or increasing their behavior moving forward? During this lesson, we will learn the four main types of reinforcement that students can access through their behavior: escape avoidance of non-preferred activities or experiences, access to attention, access to tangibles, and access to sensory or automatic reinforcement. Let's talk about behaviors maintained by escape and avoidance of non-preferred activities and experiences. There's a saying that no one is more productive around the house than when you're working on a dissertation. You'll do just about anything to avoid writing: the dishes, clean the toilet, wash clothes, anything to avoid writing just one more word. Even a 5-minute break doing something you don't necessarily enjoy will be reinforcing. Students are the exact same way. If we have students that are frequently late to class, asking to use the restroom, and it's not a medical issue, constantly sharpening their pencils, using the water fountain, asking questions to which you're certain they know the answer, these are behaviors that could be maintained by temporarily avoiding a specific task or altogether escaping a task. The big ones are more escalated behaviors, maybe profanity, verbal aggression, or physical aggression. What happens in these examples? The student is sent out of the classroom and they escape that particular task or activity. And if that behavior increases moving forward, odds are reinforcement is at play. That student is avoiding or altogether escaping something they perceive as aversive. Next, let's talk about problem behaviors maintained by access to attention. Problem behaviors you might see in the school setting maintained by access to attention include talking with peers, texting, or accessing social media and calling out in class. Sometimes we assume that students must be directly accessing attention for the function to be access to attention, but this isn't always the case. Imagine you're called on to observe a student who, according to the teacher, was randomly throwing their work on the ground, crying, and running out of the classroom. You notice that whenever the teacher began writing on the board and turned their back to the student sitting next to the observed student would subtly kick the student underneath their desks, and it would only be noticeable if someone was paying careful attention. A classroom teacher in a room with 25 students certainly couldn't catch it. After about 5 minutes of this kicking, the observed student throws their work on the ground, gets up, cries, and runs out of the classroom. The teacher follows, radioing the administrator. All of the other students stand in the doorway, just watching what was going on in the hallway, and the student that was doing the kicking just sits there smiling, watching the chaos unfold. This problem illustrates attention. While the kicking student isn't directly accessing attention, their behavior is still maintained by attention because it is all about getting a reaction out of the student he was kicking. Let's now talk about access to tangibles. Tangibles can be defined as preferred items and activities for our students. What does behavior maintained by access to tangibles look like in a school setting? It could be students engaging in problem behaviors in order to access toys or specific playground equipment. Another example is when students steal tokens from other students' desks as part of a token economy. This is another example of problem behavior maintained by access to tangibles. Let's talk about one more example. Say there's a kindergartner who really likes the Star Lab, essentially a bounce house, but one used as part of a science curriculum in an elementary school. The Star Lab teaches students about the solar system, constellations, and related concepts. It's typically located in a school's library for a few weeks out of the school year. Now, to get inside the Star Lab, one must crawl up a small ramp to the top section, which is dark. Now, this kindergartner would run out of her classroom and run into the library, crawl up into the Star Lab, because it was, for her, really reinforcing. Now imagine a fully grown adult crawling up into the Star Lab, trying to verbally redirect an enthusiastic kindergartner out of this awesome inflatable bounce house. To summarize, problem behavior maintained by access to tangibles is typically related to preferred items and activities. When you think about behaviors maintained by access to tangibles, think, what do I get if I engage in this behavior? Access to sensory or automatic reinforcement is probably the toughest behavioral function to identify. Think of access to sensory or automatic reinforcement as reinforcement obtained through one or more of the 5 senses: hearing, smelling, feeling, tasting, and seeing. The big question to ask yourself if you're looking to see whether a behavior is maintained by access to sensory reinforcement is, if no one else were around, would a problem behavior still occur? That's a great way to differentiate attention-seeking behaviors from sensory or automatic reinforcement maintained behavior. Tapping pencils or fingers, singing and or humming, and nail picking are behaviors that could be attention maintained, but they could also be maintained by sensory or automatic reinforcement. Ask yourself, if no one were around, would that behavior still be occurring? If the answer is yes, odds are sensory reinforcement is at play. Here's another example of behavior maintained by access to sensory or automatic reinforcement. There's a first grade student who randomly runs into the cafeteria during class. Now, at first glance, it seems like this would be related to escape or avoidance maintained behavior. But there isn't a clear pattern to the behavior. It occurs less than once a week, maybe twice a month. The behavior wasn't seemingly related to the same task or activity in the classroom or when the same peers were present. Later, it was discovered that the behavior only occurred when certain foods were being cooked in the cafeteria. Simply put, he liked the smell of those foods being cooked, and that's what was maintaining that behavior. All that had to happen was to provide him the opportunity to go to the cafeteria contingent on problem behaviors not happening, or contingent on desired behaviors occurring. For example, we could tell the student, "Hey, finish this task, and can you do me a favor? Can you walk down to the cafeteria with your friend and just let the cafeteria workers know how much we appreciate everything they're doing for us?" After implementing the strategy, there's no more problem behaviors after that. He got to go out and smell those foods that he really enjoyed, contingent on the problem behavior of running out of the classroom not happening, or completing a task for doing another desired behavior. You might be thinking, well, this is great. I just have to find out which one of these four main functions is maintaining problem behaviors, and I can address student behavior. If only it were that easy. Unfortunately, behaviors can also be maintained by more than one function. Now, what does that look like? Imagine you're catching up on grading in your classroom when a student of yours walks by on the way to math class and says, "I'll see you later. I think I'm going to have a long weekend." At that moment, you realize, wait, it's only Thursday. Later, you find out through an email that said the student, Bobby, was sent home for cursing at his math teacher. Through data collection and talking to Bobby, his teachers, and the administrator, it's uncovered that Bobby was accessing three types of reinforcement through this behavior. First of all, escape or avoidance. Math was Bobby's least preferred activity, and so he would curse at his math teacher. His math teacher would send him out of the classroom. He was avoiding it altogether, escaping math task demands. Second, attention. He was getting tons of attention contingent on this behavior. Everyone in his classroom would ooh and ah when they heard him cursing at his teacher. He got tons of peer attention before being sent out of the classroom. Tangibles were involved as well. When he got sent to the office, there wasn't always an administrator to meet with him right away. It was then that he had time to access his cell phone in the office. Further, when he was getting sent home, he mentioned he would play video games all weekend. So, three functions that are accessed: tangibles, escape or avoidance of non-preferred tasks and activities, and access to attention maintaining that behavior. Sometimes identifying that function is far easier said than done. Typically in those cases, there's more than one function maintaining that behavior. As we finish, here's a mnemonic to remember the four main functions. Everybody eats. E for escape or avoidance, A for access to attention, T for tangible, and S for sensory or automatic reinforcement.